Hey, did you know that in the Bible there's a story where a whole town comes out to rape these two angels who were staying at this guy's house? And the guy is all like, no, please, rape my daughter instead. And before the daughter can be like, what? He pushes her out the door, and she's like, Daddy, help me. And he's all like, don't come in here. And the whole town is like, well, fine, we will rape her instead. And they did. That's fucked up. Now, this story tells us a lot about how terrible Christianity is, because, it's rape and stuff, and there's angels, bad thing happened in the Bible, and look, back in the heyday of the new atheist movement on the internet, this story was brought up a lot in order to impeach the character of Christianity. And it was all done in a you don't know your own Bible kind of context, because, to be honest, at the time, I still considered myself a Christian, just not a very good one, and I had never really heard of this story, and nobody that I talked to ever really had either. We remember the fall of Babylon and all that, but not that story in particular. And you know why? Because that story isn't an important tenet of Christianity. It's just there in the Bible. It has no real theological significance. I'm not going to get into a philosophical tear about atheism here, but suffice it to say, nobody had really heard of or thought about this story because it isn't an important part of the Christian faith, and it doesn't really say anything about Christianity. You're just taking those elements out of the cohesive whole and presenting them in a vacuum. So, tropes versus women in video games. Why am I talking about this in 2018 when this ship has already pretty much sailed and everybody's already spoken their piece on it? Well, because, as is so often the case, I'm a bit late to the party here, but I did bring snacks. And secondly, I think it's indicative of the kinds of pop culture analysis that I'm seeing more and more these days. It still gets brought up a lot, at least she does, and I think there's a fair amount of suspicion surrounding these kinds of observations that I think, a little unwarranted and overblown. So let's talk about this. In the year of our Lord 2017, I watched Tropes versus Women in Video Games. It didn't make me mad. It basically pointed out that video game narratives can further female tropes and stereotypes just like all narratives can. I am here going to address Anita Sarkeesian personally, and I'm going to say a word in response to the crux of your position that you may never have heard from one of your detractors, and I do consider myself one of your detractors. And the word is this. Noted. I mean it. Noted for future reference. I've listened to your argument, and you've convinced me. Video games can tend to contain the same tropes that might be sexist or otherwise disempowering to women. Noted for future reference. What would you like me to do next? See, that's the sticking point with me. It's not that what you're saying is disparaging to games or gamers. It's that they're so banal and general and frankly minuscule that I don't understand how they could be disparaging to anybody. That is to say, they're so minuscule as to have no practical significance. I mean, I didn't detect any solutions in this series. It was as if you were making these observations as if they were solutions, and I don't get that. Maybe I should look outside your series, to your work in general, to find...
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
Jesus Christ. Okay, hold on a second. Let's back up. I get what you're saying. I really do. Culture is written by the dominant power structure and group and power and all that. I understand what you're saying, but there's a mitigating factor in that situation. The fact that you have to point it all out means that it isn't deliberate and isn't representative of an actual attitude on anybody's part. The fact that you have to point it out means that it's incidental and insignificant. It seems like these observations are being made to the same effect as bringing up that Bible story, just to impeach the character. Not of video games per se, but of the culture at large. It seems like these things are pointed out not as problems in and of themselves, but as evidence that, as you put it, everything is sexist and racist and homophobic, and it gets into everything. Case in point, your observations about video games, and I don't think it does that, not in the way you're talking about. I'm going to paraphrase a legal opinion that I once saw on Leonard French's channel and say that when it comes to sexism, racism, and the social problems that we face as a society, I am much less interested in the question of what minuscule subconscious minutia might be having some kind of homeopathic effect on the culture at large and perpetuating things that might lead to sexism and such like. And I'm much more interested in more prosaic concepts like who's doing what to whom and why. And that's really my ultimate criticism of your work in this series, and other things that I've seen to this effect. Pointing out little instances like these just isn't a helpful observation, and it doesn't tell us anything about the culture in general, how people are seen or treated in it, or what we can do to make it better. Like that story in the Bible, those tropes have nothing to do with the culture. They're just present in it, like a vestigial organ. There was a time when racism and sexism were part of the whole framework of our laws and society, and that wasn't undone by pointing out little things that you might not have noticed if you weren't looking for them. The fact that we have to use this fine of a microscope to identify this stuff is probably an indication that things have improved. I think that America still struggles mightily with racism and sexism and homophobia, and I'm all for criticizing the status quo. And I'm all for looking at things from different perspectives, but when the examples are this imperceptible, it's probably best that they stay that way. The problems are solvable. Thank you, and Godspeed.